Hey, welcome back to Midas Letter Live. My guest this segment is Gary Thompson. He's chairman and CEO of Brixton Metals Corp, trading on the TSX Venture under the symbol BBB. Gary, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me, James.
The reason I wanted to talk to you today, Gary, was because you put out this fantastic press release outlining this drill result, which I had to do a double take because the numbers are somewhat astounding. Almost 2% cobalt, 15,000 grams per ton silver over a meter, within a broader intercept of 7 meters, grading essentially 100 ounces per ton silver and 0.27% cobalt. Now that's, by any measure, an outstanding result. And the response in the share price was arguably just flat. And so I wanted to ask you, am I missing something here? Is that not a very significant drill intercept?
Are you kidding me? That's an amazing drill intercept. You're right, it's a double take. Pretty rarely do you get silver in the percent category. So basically 1.5%, which is 450 ounces per ton silver. I mean, do the math. Even at $16 ounce silver, which is around the current price, US dollars, that's pretty amazing. So we're super excited about this, and having 2% cobalt in there. So that 1 meter interval, if you look at it on a cobalt equivalent, that's like equivalent to like 12.6% cobalt, or 18,000 grams per ton silver, which is like 537 ounces of silver on a combined equivalent basis.
Right.
So I just think I think the market's asleep right now for junior miners, and waiting for what's it going to take to get people excited about the space again. And from our perspective, it doesn't really matter. We're reasonably well funded, and we're going to continue to drill this thing out and see what kind of resource we can put together on it. So yeah, we're pretty excited about. We continue to hit good results here, and it's a pretty unique opportunity for us.
Excitement aside, if I was to look at this, and I'm no geologist, but you don't exactly have to be a rocket scientist geologist to understand that intercepting that kind of a mix of silver and cobalt is indicative of at least a pathway to some larger ore body, potentially. I mean, it's possible that that's strictly anomalous, but the fact that it's a meter within a 7 meter intercept of other high-grade silver, cobalt, nickel component suggests that there's like, did you just pass through with the drill head the contact of a zone that is potentially volcanogenic massive sulfides or something like that?
No, the high-grade mineralization that we're seeing, that call it 7.8 meters of almost 3 kilos of silver there. That's a vein style system. We're seeing a series of narrow veins within that almost 8 meter interval. And then in addition to some of these narrow veins, a combination of these veins together coalescing, you also get some very fine disseminated mineralization, silver and cobalt minerals within that interval. So it's more of a vein-like system there. But one of the other interesting things that we released in the news release was the lower section of 70 meters of nickel, cobalt, silver mineralization. Now these crazy high grade numbers that we released in the 8 meters and within that 1 meter, that kind of dwarfs the grade of the lower section. But I think the lower section is equally important. In fact, it may be more important in this larger scale of a mining opportunity, because the lower section is not a vein system. It may be more like a replacement style mineralization system. And the fact that we hit 70 meters of it, and we're actually looking at a bunch of different holes that we drilled, even in 2016, going back and revisiting them. We're getting 0.1 nickel, 0.01% cobalt, and a little bit of silver in there. But what's interesting about that is, from an aerial extent, it looks like it could be quite large. And obviously, we've got to do more work. That's what we're doing now. We're actually stepping out several hundred meters away from that lower section to see if we can put together maybe a larger, perhaps lower grade, but much larger resource there at depth. And I think what's important to note is that historically, people that did work in the cobalt camp were focused on the high grade veins near surface. And this is actually starts at about 150 meters, the lower section, down to say 250. So most previous operators never looked that deep in the cobalt camp because they had this theory, and rightfully so, that most of the high grade mineralization is fairly close to the Nipissing sill, which is higher up in the formation.
Right. Okay. So then, in terms of next steps, how do you approach this thing? What's your next sort of move on the deposit?
Well, it's kind of twofold, I guess. One is continue to. We have a whole list of targets that we're drilling on, and some of them are just going to be follow up on this spectacular silver cobalt intercept that we hit. Continue to try and expand those along strike. And basically try and tie together a mineralized zone around the high grade. Ultimately, we want to get to an established maiden resource, and I think this round of drilling is not going to get us to that resource statement yet. But what we're trying to do is say, look, we've got a bunch of targets. Let's go through and test a bunch of these targets. Let's see which one at the end of this 10 to 15,000 meter campaign. Let's see which target. Which zone out of all this drilling that we're doing is one that we really want to start to hang our hat on and put some serious drilling into. So it's really more of an exploratory exercise for us to test this area to see what we can find in around the old workings and underneath the workings that would get us to the next leg of drilling, which would hopefully be something like a 30,000 meter campaign, which we hope that will allow us to establish that maiden resource.
Right. Okay, so the final sort of question I have for you, that's in Langus Township, Ontario. That's not it's not exactly remote, is it?
Well, no, it's not remote at all. I mean, this was an active mining camp. There's well-established roads, railway, power. Infrastructure is pretty hard to beat, and in fact, it's one of the lowest drilling cost areas that we've been involved in. And as you know, we've got some remote projects, and so this is a well-established camp. And that image you're looking at there, that's some very high-grade native silver. So we're pretty excited about this, and given where the cobalt market is and the battery metals market, it's kind of interesting that we acquired the asset for the silver, and it looks like we're getting a lot of excitement around the cobalt story as well.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, Gary, we're going to keep up with you here, and we'll come back to you in a quarter's time and see what the next result looks like. Thanks so much for your time today.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate it.